Hi, Deborah. Hello.
Hi,
Good
it's
to have you.
okay. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to have you here. So,
Thanks for having me.
yeah. So just like I said, I'm just going to read a brief profile of you again, so that people can
Okay.
know who we're talking to. So today, guys, we have with us Deborah Chukwuedo. She's a commercial lawyer, like I said earlier, with extensive practice in negotiation and structuring transactions and commercial contracts. She's also a dispute resolution practitioner. And if you read your screen and see what we're talking about, you will know that she's just the best person for this conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Toke.
I said the coronavirus pandemic has disrupted a whole lot of sector, and that has been one reason or the other for employers to lay off staff, to slash salary. And, you know, people are beginning to wonder, employees are beginning to wonder, is this right? Is this even legal? Is this justifiable?
Yeah. What's going on in the world is not new to us. We've been trying to figure out what's happening for the past 6 weeks. We have a pandemic that has forced a lot of businesses to rethink their operations. A lot of contracts generally have had to rethink their contractual obligations and their operations. And of course, employment contracts are not left out. Government has restricted movement for a lot of people, for everyone really. And our business in Nigeria is not reliant on technology. So we don't have a situation where they say, oh, don't move out today, and the next day you're just saying, oh, no problem. Our business operations rely on technology. That's not how we operate in Nigeria. We're still very manual in Nigeria. I mean, our courts that are full every day and have a backlog of cases have not operated for 6 weeks. So when you think about that, and you think about the fact that a lot of governments that are even more sophisticated than we are, were also caught unawares. I've heard of only one company that had an insurance cover for pandemic.
Wow.
I have heard of no, and it's a foreign company. Because basically, when you think of the fact that the last pandemic was in 1912, now in Nigeria in 2016, we had a devaluation of our currency that affected a lot of businesses. When that happens, the first thing you're doing is trying to reduce your costs. So even if you had insurance covers for pandemics and business interruptions, gradually you're going to reduce all of those things just to keep afloat.
Yeah, very true.
In Nigeria, the government order shutdown started in March 2020. A lot of businesses shut down. There has been reduced work. There has been reduced income. Even the income you were expecting before the shutdown, the people who were supposed to pay you are saying, you know what, can we just watch this and hold on? So even now that government has said, like in Lagos State, you now have a reduced restriction. Some businesses have been allowed to operate, but there are still guidelines. You can't operate as usual. Your employer has a bigger responsibility to ensure that you maintain social distancing guidelines and all of that in your place of employment. And then the businesses have not even increased. For me, that I work in a law firm, the courts are not fully open. So all of our business that relies on court operations are at a standstill. So where do we go from here? Your employer does not have work to give you. And if there is no work, how can they pay you? Exactly. But at the same time, the employees did not ask for this either. They are also reliant on their monthly salaries. Now, you come to a situation where there is no work and there's no salary. What do? Your first starting point is your employment contract.
Yeah.
What does the employment contract say? If it's not sophisticated enough to cover a situation like this, what does the company policy say? What does the staff handbook say? Does your business have an insurance cover for business operations? And if it does, what does it cover? Are there any provisions for the employees in a time like this? Can you work from home? If you can work from home, what does it entail? And then even for the companies that are very manual and can't work from home, what does your salary say? You know, you can't just tell people that, okay, work from, or for those that can work from home, okay, work from home, and then you still expect salary as usual. There are some salaries that have been broken down into transportation, basic salary, insurance, feeding allowance, clothing allowance. What does that say? Do you understand? So how can you make the best of this situation knowing what you know? Your employer cannot come and say to you that, oh, there's no work and we can't pay you salary. When you or come and say to you, oh, we have to reduce your salaries. When you do that, you're going to get frustrated employees.
Yes.
Like we've been seeing, people complaining. And the first thing they will do is go to the courts. Can we afford a situation where the courts are not in operation and everyone wants to go to the courts to air their grievances? And of course, courts are also going to cost you money because lawyers also are going to charge you. So I believe that the first thing anyone should do is not for the employer to say, oh, we can't pay you salaries, or for the employees to say, oh, you must pay me salary. I think the first thing both parties should do is study the employment contract, study the company policy and the staff handbook, and then sit down and negotiate. Have a meeting with your employees, for the employers that is. Have a meeting with your employees, and for the employees, don't go there empty-handed. You have to know what your contract says. You have to know what your government policy, what the company policy and the handbook says. You have to know what is even happening internationally. Because internationally, they are also trying to manage these situations. You have some places talking about temporary suspension of contracts. You know, we don't have that kind of provision in our law. Our law does not provide for that. But thinking about the kind of business that your company does, is it something you can ask for? Can you say to your employer, let me take 1 month off, or let me take 2 weeks off, and then you can pick up, then we can agree on a certain percentage of my salary while we wait for things to get better? Or is your company so small that you can't even expect that business will resume as normal? And then you know that what the employer is going to say is, oh, we're going to close down our business. Those are things you have to consider. Then, of course, where you even try to carry out those negotiations and it doesn't work, the first thing is not to run to the court. The courts can't help you now. They are home. You know, the Chief Justice provided guidelines for remote proceedings so that courts can have their proceedings online. But the guideline starts by saying that where the matter is urgent and the judge considers it is urgent. So it's not if you consider your matter is urgent, it's if the court decides that, oh,
this is
exactly,
urgent.
this matter is urgent, let's hear it. And if they don't, what are you going to do? Wait? You know, so I think that negotiation is the best way forward. There's some for contracts generally, and including employment contracts. Depending on the business operations of your company, it could either be that your employer will rely on frustration. You know, I said earlier that some businesses cannot even, they're gone after this. They can't resume. If you had a service business, exactly. So those ones can't resume. People that have weddings and in churches, I mean, no one is going to allow you go to a church right now. So if you had a contract for things like for a wedding or food, that has been frustrated by this. So you can actually ask that the contract be terminated. And if you work for a company like that, that's what you expect. But if you know that after this, gradually business will resume again, I urgently urge, I seriously urge that you sit down with your employer, whether they call you or not, sit down with them and try and fashion out a way to manage the contract during this period. Usually, when it comes to labor law, our labor law is 1971, yeah, it's 1971. But the good thing is that when the judge wants to deliver a judgment, he will always consider international best practices. But you see, even now, we can't rely on that because they don't even know what's going on. They are scrambling, you know, to catch up with what's going on. So we have no laws to rely on. The only thing we can rely on is common sense, good judgment, and what is fair for everyone concerned. I think I've covered most of what I want to cover.
Okay, let me pick it from there. Speaking on what is fair, what do you think an employee can do in a situation where the employer don't even sit down with the employee? They just make a decision. And I know that that's what HR is meant for. It's supposed to be an intermediary between the employee and the employer. But then they, for some reason, they do not even they don't consider your own effort or your own view
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
decision-making process. And so they just forward
Mm.
you an email telling you this is how it's going to be now. What do you do as an employee in a situation like that?
Go and look at your employment contract. Even if the company decides that it's your position is redundant, they can't terminate your employment like that. They must give you notice. They must give you notice. And if they don't give you notice, then you are entitled to damages. It's not usual for the court to force an employer to take back an employee. That only happens with statutory employment, where your statute says that you must work for this period and this is what happened. They can reinstate you. But for most private contracts, they would not ask that you be reinstated, but you will be awarded damages. But can you get damages now that the courts are not in session? No. What I would advise for a person like that is to look at the contract, look at the company policy, and then get a mediator. Now, mediators are not litigation lawyers.
Okay.
There are people who have learned to sort of negotiate a dispute to get the best possible option for that person. So you can get a mediator, or you can speak to one. I mean, I know it's not easy to afford. Getting a lawyer now sounds like a luxury. So you can speak with a lawyer, or you get a mediator to come into your office to let them realize that, look, this is wrong. This is what I'm entitled to. I don't want to go to court. I'm not trying to fight. I just want my entitlement. And you can come to an agreement. It will be difficult for very small businesses to listen to that, but that's a very good start. Get a mediator. The multi-door courthouse is attached to the court, and I know I just saw today that they've released their online guidelines. So a lot of mediators have started working online too, and that mediator can help you to try and get a negotiation of that contract.
So when I was doing a quick research, I saw that our Labor Act Section 20 says something about last in, first out. So because people have been actually asking how justifiable it is to just terminate an employee's contract like that, even when you consider that role quite redundant. So how would you counsel employers to go about voiding employee contracts during crises like this?
Last in, first out is yes, it was stated in the act, but the truth is that in actual practice, you actually consider the skills that you need the most in your business.
Okay.
First, before you do that. So when a company wants to rely on redundancy, which is why I've been saying, what does the company do? What does the contract of employment say? Because if it's a company that right now, let me use a business that does deliveries for a restaurant.
Okay.
Now restaurants, you're not allowed to sit in restaurants anymore.
Yes.
You have to deliver food.
Yes.
No sitters. But a lot of people are not going to buy food from the restaurant now. They're going to cook at home. So imagine on a usual busy day in Lekki where bikes are running around. If you even ask if you try to buy food in Lekki, you may not get your delivery for another hour because they're delivering to other people. Now imagine that company has about 20 bikes. But now because of this lockdown, they have been using only 5 bikes daily, and the bikes are there parked. They are not going to keep those bikes there. They're probably paying some loans on the bikes. What they're going to do is just say, you know what, for the past 3 weeks, we've been using only 5 bikes every day. We have to reduce our staff strength. We do not want to, but we have too many people for the business that we have. Now, they would then decide that they have to reduce their staff strength, and that voids the employment. So it will be difficult to force that employer to keep you. But what you can do is go to your contract and see what they say. If they say that, okay, they will pay you 1 month salary in lieu, or they will give you 2 weeks notice and 2 weeks salary in lieu, then you are entitled to that. Some employers are even have been fed this period and have said, you know what, we normally would give you 2 weeks notice or 2 weeks salary, but we're going to give you 1 month so that we don't want any litigation. We don't want any trouble. Just take 1 month and an extra this and go. That's fine.
Yeah, but
That's what we've done. That's okay.
But that works in situations where they follow due process in the employment phase. There are some people who, you know, get into employment with no stated contract. So what do employees in a situation like that, what do they do?
So an employee works for someone and he doesn't have a contract of employment?
Yeah, they don't have all these stated things that, oh, after 2 weeks, we're going to pay you for 2 weeks. Even when we want to let you go and lay you off, we give you a notice of, you know, some people just, you know, because we've heard instances where people make irrational moves during this time, because as employers, you just feel that you're not making profit at a time like this. So why should I keep my employees and all of that? And so they're not even thinking through this due process, and they just hand it over or hand out to the employees like, oh, sorry, we don't need your services anymore.
It can't be immediate termination. You need notice. You need notice, and you need your severance pay. So if the contract doesn't say anything about notice and severance pay, then you have to look at what is usual in your particular field.
Okay.
Yes. Some particular fields will say 1 month. Some particular fields will say, some professionals actually have 6 months in their contract.
Wow.
You know, so you have to look at your particular industry and what is usual, and of course, what is fair. Every law is based on fairness. So you have to look for what is fair and usual.
Okay, speaking of what is fair and usual, what happens to employment and investment contracts during the pandemic? So let me state, for instance, you're an investment contract now, and you're supposed to be paid maybe like some 100,000 every month. But you're not totally out of business as an employer, just like you're not making as much as you were making before the pandemic. So how do you revise this in such a way that the employee still feels you're fair?
If you have, first and foremost, before you can even rely on the pandemic, you have to show that it's actually affecting your contract, because it's not affecting anybody. Because if you work for an internet or a telecoms provider, they can't tell you that the pandemic is affecting them. They're making the most money. So I think that you have to be sure that the pandemic is actually affecting your business and your contract, whether it's an investment contract or an employment contract, because you mentioned investment. Now, what is the effect of the pandemic? Is it actually frustrating the contract so that you can't go on with that contract again? That's what you have to consider. Now, if it isn't, and you just need a suspension, then you can't terminate a contract where you just need a suspension. There's a word in law, I'm sure you've heard about it recently, called force majeure. Force majeure is usually for a suspension. It just says that, you know, there are things happening now, I can't fulfill my obligations right now. We need to suspend this contract till this thing has tides over. But where it's an absolute frustration of the contract, then you know that contract needs to be terminated. But there are still grounds for termination. Every contract must have a termination clause. Every contract. If it doesn't have a termination clause, then you have to rely on what is fair and equitable. I think that anyone who is trying to negotiate an unfair termination should, like I said earlier, look at your contract, look at your policy, look at your staff handbook, look at what is happening in your industry. Because if what is happening in your industry, even if you don't have it on paper, anyone will recognize it as usual. So you apply all of those things, then you will know what you should be entitled to. Now, in negotiating, if in your industry, they normally give 2 months notice or 2 months salary in lieu. That's the beginning point of your negotiation. But you know, in negotiation, you don't always walk away with what you want. You have to know where your bottom line is. Okay, based on what I've seen in the industry, I'm entitled to 2 months notice, but I don't have a contract, or my contract doesn't say anything. So because I have a bad contract already, I will start negotiating from 2 months, and I may end up with 6 weeks pay or 1 month pay. Do you understand? Instead of involving a lawyer and going to court, what's the best I can walk away with? And then, of course, you go into your negotiation meeting with that.
Oh, great. So, like I said, there was a viral video where the CEO of Access Bank was talking about pay cuts and a right, no, instead of a downturn, now a right turn, and saying that some of the people that are actually not needed, like tea girls, you would have to go and stuff like that. That video caused an uproar on the internet, and a lot of people, you know, it didn't go down well with some people. Though from an employer's point of view, you're going to have to look at it like, do I really need these people? If I don't, then I think I should let them go. But that makes me ask you, are there alternatives to termination of employment contracts? Like, what's the best option? Oh, you don't want to, because all of these people now actually rely on the money made at the end of the month for themselves and their families and all of that. And maybe, just maybe, they had seen it coming, but they were just hopeful that it wouldn't get to that level. But sadly, it did for some people.
Yeah.
Speaking for employers now, do you feel that there are alternatives to terminating the contract?
There are always alternatives. You know that, and let me start by saying that this is also a time for employees to actually sit up and put on their thinking caps. Okay. Imagine a tea girl now, you're employed as a tea girl. I don't think you studied being a tea girl in school, or you haven't learned other things in the office. We have people sometimes who only deliver letters, but they do so many other things in the office. So sure. In negotiating with your employer, you know, yes, I was a tea girl, but there are other things I can do in the office. Let's negotiate. Let's vary the terms of my employment contract. Let's come up with something that will work for you. I mean, you're not asking for a favor. It will work for you. It will work for me. At the end of the day, it's important for everyone to ensure that there is no reduction there's no increase in unemployed people in the market. It won't work well for anybody. So you definitely have been doing more things in your office. Try and take up more, and then you can vary the terms of your contract. Yes, you don't need a tea person anymore, but you need someone to do this and to do that. You know, get something else you can do in the office and vary the terms of your contract. And please also get that in writing too.
That's great. But between you and I, do you think employers actually allow opportunity for negotiation? Because you've been mentioning negotiation, and I'm like, do they really allow you negotiate?
They don't actually have a choice in these times, because it is easier for you to, I mean, yes, I know some jobs it may be easier to just terminate that employment immediately. Yes, and then even if they threaten you with legal action, you can keep them for 1 month, like the people you talked about, and actually give them a proper notice and say, okay, you know what, stay, I'll pay your salary this month, and then give them the proper 1 month notice and then terminate their employment. You can do that. I know it's not easy to negotiate. In Nigeria especially, I mean, I'm not speaking as a lawyer now, I'm speaking as a Nigerian. We are very stressed and frustrated. So of course, all the employer is thinking about is, I mean, how can I reduce my what's it called, at the end of the month, my salary my wages at the end of the month, how can I reduce it and keep my business afloat? That's all they are thinking. So it's not going to be easy to negotiate. In mediation, which is, you know, really not as tough as the courts, you can be there for 3 months and 6 months, but you have to know, I mean, if you work for that employer for a while, you know the kind of person that employer is, and you can negotiate better. There have been mediations where the issue was a land issue, but the problem at the end of the day was that someone's child poured water across an old man and disrespected him. So as far as he was concerned, you must leave my house today. You know, but in mediation, when you speak with both parties, you can get to the root of the matter and see what the problem is, and try and, okay, you know what, can you just apologize to Baba? This is what happened that day. And then there's no problem. So you've worked for your employer for a while. He's not going to say, oh, you want to negotiate? Oh, come here. You know, you have to find the best way to approach that employer. And if you can't, then get a mediator to come into your workplace and do that.
Oh, great. So let me read this person's comment. D_Ezeani. It says, I feel for jobs that are likely to pick up after this lockdown, for redundancy roles, you can negotiate a salary reduction or a temporary period of suspension of employment. Then when things get better, you can bring them in. You can bring them back in. Oh, that's
exactly.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
but since we're talking employment contract in its entirety, let me ask you this: what do you think employees and employers should have in mind when initiating? Because there are still people that are just newly employing people, even at a time like this. So, what do you think an employee or an employer should bear in mind when initiating an employment contract?
Okay, an employment contract. I'm sure when you were employed, you saw your employment contract, but you didn't see the staff policy, the staff handbook, and the company policy, yes?
Yes.
And that's where a lot of things are hidden. Now, once you take up the employment, I don't know if you read the article I had in your paper. Once you sign your contract of employment and you're coming, you have said that you agree to all the terms of the contract. Now, what you need to do, I know it's tough, but you must look at those documents. They may not let you see those documents until you have signed and accepted the terms of the contract of employment, but ask to see them. Ask to see them and try and negotiate termination so that no matter what, you have time. Now, summary dismissal, which is where you have been insubordinate to your employer, they can terminate your contract immediately. But where you have a proper employment contract, they must give you notice or salary in lieu. So you have to make sure that, I mean, even if yes, I know that a lot of those terms are in the company policy and in the staff handbook, but make sure it's in your employment contract itself. Your resumption dates, your termination terms, whether it's going to be 1 month or 2 weeks in lieu or salary in lieu. You have to make sure that is in your termination
your
termination in the terms of termination.
Okay.
Yes. And the sad thing about contracts of they call them contracts. They're not employment contracts. They're like consultancy contracts.
Okay.
And they may tell you that they won't give you any notice. You have to insist on at least 2 weeks. Even if you're not considered an employee of that company, try and make sure that you have at least 2 weeks to give you time.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. So before we go, let me ask you this. What legal redress are available in cases where contracts are reneged upon or employment terminated?
Well, you have the National Industrial Court, which is where you usually go to make sure your rights are addressed. And but alternatively, you have mediators. Now, I like mediators because mediators can save you the financial and emotional stress of going to court, especially now. And like I said earlier, a lot of mediators are online now. So you need to approach a mediator. They are all over the place. It's just that Nigerians just like litigation a lot. The LMDC has mediators. They are online now. We had a webinar last week with a couple of online mediators that are in Nigeria. So maybe go on LinkedIn, look for a mediator to come into your workplace. Yes.
Oh, because this person says, how do you get a mediator to come into a workplace? That someone asked. Eureka and Andrew asked.
Yes, you speak to, if you work in a company that has a HR department, you can approach them. That's if they've terminated your company, your employment wrongly, illegally. You can write them and of course state your grounds and ask for a meeting. Now, after that first meeting, if it's not successful, then you can get a mediator. Go to the LMDC. Go to the LMDC, or if you have lawyer friends, ask them for mediators. Or you go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, Google Nigerian mediators, and you'll get one to come into your place of work and get you a solution. Your employer knows that the alternative, except I doubt that employers are are illiterate, but your employer knows that the alternative is to go to court. If you go to court, he loses, you lose, because you're both going to pay lawyers and you're going to be going to court at least once a month, at most twice a month, before you get a solution. But if you get the mediator to come into your office and sit both of you down, you will get something that will satisfy both of you to the extent that you can walk away happily.
Oh, that's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah. Thank you so much for being a part of this. But
thank you for having me, okay?
So what's your advice for employees during the pandemic when they get either temporary or permanent nullification of their employment contract?
Get a mediator. Write to your employer first. Write to them first. You don't want them to feel disrespected, or you're calling other people into my business. Write to them first. After you've studied your contract, studied the staff handbook, studied the company policy, see what is happening internationally, and so you know in your head what the fairest thing is, then approach them. Yeah.
And
if that doesn't work, of course, get a mediator.
Oh, great. So two things. One, you talked about what you must talk about. Your negotiation skill must come to play even at the beginning of your contract. Putting in mind the termination terms. Did I get that right?
Oh, yes. Yes, you did.
Oh, great. And secondly, another thing I want to touch on, I think you love mediators, right?
I love mediators. I've been going to court for 16 years. Yes. Wow. I do not enjoy it. I mean, court helps me analytically in thinking, but I do not enjoy it because you don't get a resolution quickly. Now, with mediators, my first experience of mediation was a court-ordered one, because the other party had written, we have these documents you fill when you're filing your court process, where they would ask you, do you think your matter can be resolved amicably? And you say yes. Once you do that, the court will send you to the multi-door courthouse for mediation. The first time I went there, I rolled my eyes. I was so upset. I said, what are we doing here? But we got a resolution. It was not what my client wanted. It was not what the other party wanted either. We filed for so much more, but we came to a resolution and we went back home in 2 months.
Wow.
In 2 months. I don't know if you've seen lawyers' files. They're not pretty to look at. They're full of documents. They're old. And what is it? Because somebody is not satisfied with the way something has gone on. A mediator will sit you down. And you know, when you go into business with people, there's something that made you both excited to sign that contract at the beginning.
Very true.
And that gets lost. It gets lost in the middle of the disputes that you have. It may be something, it may even be that you had a conversation on a bad day. But once a mediator can sit down with you, they can get beneath all of those layers of frustration and anger and remind you of why exactly you entered into this contract. And then you can see clearly, whichever party was the one that failed in that contract, you can then see what actually happened. And then you can reach a resolution and you either go your separate ways or you actually continue in business. I've seen people who were in dispute before continuing business. So both parties are happy. It's a win-win. It's not what you wanted when you went to court, but you reach a resolution that makes both of you happy and you move on. I always like to tell people that you're not in the business of dispute resolution. You're not going to have a business and the next thing you're thinking of is you're paying millions and millions trying to settle a dispute when you can reach something that just satisfied everybody and you both go your separate ways or continue in business. So that's why I like ADR. I like mediation.
Oh, great. So finally, this person says, most employers are wicked. What can you do when an employer is allocating jobs or tasks not within your scope of appointment as an employee?
Not within your scope of employment.
Yes.
One of my favorite terms that I've seen in an employment contract is that this is what you're going to do, but you may be called upon to do other things depending on the urgency. in the office. Yeah, that happens a lot. But so I mean, a lot of employers rely on that. But the truth is, your contract of employment says what your basic expectations are.